later on. Today is an interactive, there's an interactive component for today's presentation, so it's best if you can join us on your computer. If you are on your phone, however, please do not put your phone on hold. And as always, please be mindful of our colleagues on the call and try to speak one at a time. I think we have a relatively small group today, so that should not be an issue. On the agenda for today, the meeting will be broken out into two parts. The first part will be a quick overview on the Charlotte Future 2040 policy map, as well as the Charlotte Streets map. And then we'll go into the community conversation piece where we'll really look at the draft 2040 policy map recommendations for this specific geography. And then we'll do some interactive polling, and we'll look at the actual map and open it up for Q&A and discussion on maybe any adjustments or anything that is of concern on the policy map. So let's begin with what is the purpose of the draft map. So the Charlotte Streets map. The purpose of these two maps is to help implement the vision for of the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan, which is the guiding document for the city's growth and development over the next 20 years. That plan was adopted in June of 2021, and the policy map, the streets map, as well as the UDO, all sort of ladder up to the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan. These are all the major initiatives to help implement that plan. The Charlotte Future 2040 policy map will identify appropriate locations for future development in our neighborhoods. And then the streets map will identify the multimodal vision for Charlotte streets to support mobility between the places that we live, work, and play. And then the UDO is a consolidation of all of the development regulations within the city. So again, how do these two maps relate to each other? The 2040 policy map includes land use and form. And then the Charlotte Streets map includes mobility guidance. And this all is intended to inform the built environment. So what are the two draft maps? Let's look first at the Charlotte Streets map. So before going into that map, it's important to understand what we mean when we say, when we're looking at a street. So what we mean is anything between the two building fronts. So building front to building front, that's what we're considering a street. And you can see from the diagram, if you read it from left to right, that it includes, all streets include some type of combination of these components. Not all streets will include all of these components. And it's important to also know what the streets map is not, and it is not a priorities project list. So you won't find things like planned projects or whether they're funded or not. So if you go from left to right, streets will include some form of these components. Center space, which is typically included for pedestrians as a crossing point, or cars for left turns. Your travel lanes, most streets include a travel lane for your vehicles. Bicycle facilities, curb and gutter, not all streets include this, most of them do. Your amenities are a planting strip, and then your pedestrian facilities. So this is what these components make up a cross section. And that's what's going to be regulated by the streets map. So what exactly is the Charlotte Streets map? It is the map vision of our multimodal street network. It is based on council adopted policies that have been developed and refined over the last several years. And it shows the recommended cross streets for all of Charlotte's arterial streets and we'll support the UDO to ensure that we're building multimodal streets as we grow and develop. It's one of the key implementation tools for the UDO. And you'll find things like street classification, the number of lanes, and whether or not the streets have bike facilities. We want to remind you that we created an online comment application for both the Charlotte Streets Map and the 2040 Policy Map. And we can drop the link in the chat. When you open up the application, this is what you'll see. To the left-hand side, you'll see 2 comment buttons. And you can comment on either the Streets Map or the 2040 Policy Map. Once you click on that, you'll come up to a comment box, and you can fill out the relevant information. And you can see from the diagram there that once you click on a feature, it'll give you all of the relevant information. So for example, specifically for this, if you click on a street, it'll give you the actual street name, the designation, and then a description. If you need step-by-step instructions on how to leave a comment, there is a demonstration video online as well. And that takes you a step-by-step on how to leave a comment. So now we're moving on to the what exactly is the Charlotte Future 2040 Policy Map, and that's what we're going to concentrate the remainder of the presentation on. So the 2040 Policy Map is a companion to the 2040 Comprehensive Plan, and it provides guidance on where and how development should occur in the future. It also provides direction for how Charlotte should balance both the needs and opportunities that come with future growth. For example, the map will ensure that our city can accommodate its projected growth while also protecting the features that are important to the residents, such as the natural environment and then the established neighborhoods. You can see that the policy map is a translation of the comprehensive plan's place-based policies for specific geographies, and we'll get into that a little later on in the presentation. And again, it provides direction for opportunities for growth, aligning growth with infrastructure capacity. We want to make sure that we're planning growth where it makes sense to put infrastructure or where it already exists. And then it is intended to improve access to any historically underserved or disenfranchised areas of the city. So how was the policy map developed? It was developed using a tool called place types in a 3-step process. And place types is a new form of basically looking at land use. It's more holistic than what we use today, which is the future land use map. That typically only gives us use and then density in some areas. The place types, by comparison, are more holistic in that they provide a mix and proportions of land uses. They also inform building form and design, and they include guidance on mobility and open space. And the 3 steps that we used to basically map those place types was we first mapped existing development, then we mapped adopted policies. So those were policies that exist from 2010. In the adopted area plans. And then finally, we mapped the policies within the 2040 comprehensive plan, and we'll show what those look like. This is we wanted to make sure that there was an understanding of what the place types mean, and I'll go briefly through these. And then if there's any questions or you'd like more information, we can drop a link in the chat so that you can find this palette. So the first 2 place types are your residential place types, and they're typically your neighborhood 1 is where you find your lower density single family housing or very small multifamily homes. Your neighborhood 2, you find your higher density, so your apartment homes and then your townhomes along with some neighborhood serving shops and services. Then we get into the neighborhood centers and your community centers. And then by comparison, the neighborhood center is your smaller walkable mixed use areas where you find your services basically. And then the community centers are your mid-size, typically found along transit corridors and again, providing goods, services, entertainment, as well as residential. Your parks and preserve are typically, we typically want to see those closer to where people live. Your commercial designations, this is typically the older commercial car-oriented destinations, your single use or the strip malls. The campus is exactly what it sounds like. It's a grouping of buildings that serve institutions. So universities, your hospitals, and then your office parks. And then your innovation mixed use and manufacturing and logistics, they're typically employment areas. The innovation mixed use is usually a vibrant area that includes light manufacturing, office, studios, retail, and dining. Your manufacturing and logistics, I think of the Amazons in this category, where it's a wider range of job types and wages, including, again, manufacturing, distribution, and logistics. And then the last category is the regional activity centers. So these are the larger high density mixed use areas, typically intended to generate folks coming in from the region. Again, the policy map was developed using the 3 steps, and we'll go into what the inputs were as we look at the maps in the next couple slides, the next few slides. This geography is for the East Inner. It is bound generally by the edge of the southern portion of Uptown to the sort of northwest, Randolph Road, Route 4, and then Central Avenue. And just to know, it does include running through it on 74, the planned silver line. And then the map is showing the gold line as well. So let's look first at the first 2 steps that we took in coming up with the maps. So the existing development and then the adopted policies. This map reflects the existing development translated into the new place types tool. And this was translated using the existing land use and then your forms of development. So this is everything on the ground today. And you can see that there's a good portion of the yellow, which is your neighborhood 1. Some campus, which is that teal color. There's the CPCC campus towards McDowell Street, and then your Atrium Health just south of that. And there's a good portion of the commercial as well along East 7th and up towards Independence. Then the second step was to map the adopted policies. So these were the area plans done from 2010. And this is a translation based on several inputs. So your future land use, zoning, and I believe that we've only mapped things zoned through April of this year, and then your market support. In some instances, there wasn't a clear translation between the existing zoning and the future place type assignment. And in these instances, we use that market analysis that I just mentioned to determine which future place type assignment made the most realistic sense from a market perspective. And you can see the changes that you see on the map in terms of the place types. So we ended up losing some acreage in the commercial campus and manufacturing and logistics, as well as your neighborhood 2. And then we gained acreage in the neighborhood 1, your parks and preserve, and then a good amount of acreage in innovation mixed use, and then the community center, as well as your some acreage in the neighborhood center. So now this map was the third step, and it was, this is where we mapped the policies in the 2040 policy, the 2040 comp plan. And the inputs that we used for this were the equitable growth framework, which we'll cover in the next slide, the plan policies that are in the actual plan, and then survey responses. And we checked our, we checked our, the map against several checkpoints. So growth projections were used, Then we use infrastructure and environmental capacity, as well as market feasibility. And you can see from the numbers on the right-hand side where we ended up gaining and losing acreage. So our acreage in the neighborhood 1 went down just slightly. Parks and Preserve, commercial, campus, as well as innovation mixed use overall decreased. We had a significant increase in acreage in neighborhood center and then your community activity center. So covering the equitable growth framework next, the comprehensive plan calls for creating a more equitable future for all residents, which means that we need to ensure that future growth and development benefits everyone in the city. So in order to measure who does and does not currently benefit from past development in the comp plan, the equitable growth framework includes areas such as the access to housing, access to jobs, access to goods and services, and where any environmental issues may exist. You can see just from these 4 maps that there's a relatively good coverage for housing opportunity, goods and services, as well as employment. But there are gaps in the environmental justice area, and we'll look at these maps closer. So this map shows the access to housing gaps, and any of the areas outside of the hatched areas are where in access to housing is lacking, or housing diversity, meaning that you can't easily find a variety of housing types in these areas. The bullets on this page are the metrics that we use to understand where access to housing is currently lacking. And then the steps to mapping this approach was focused on what place type recommendations will provide better opportunity to improve housing diversity. So the place types that we see that do that are the neighborhood 2 community activity center and then the regional activity center. And you can see from the map that it's relatively well covered in terms of access to housing. Again, this is the access to amenities map, and you can see any of the areas outside of the hatching are where your gaps exist. For this specific one, the place types that we can map to increase access to essential goods are your neighborhood activity center, your community activity center, the regional activity center, and then commercial and innovation mixed use. And again, as with the previous map, there's a relatively good coverage for access to amenities with some exceptions. This shows your environmental justice gaps. So anything outside of the hatching is where there is an issue with environmental justice. And we typically see this in areas with proximity to heavy industrial or major transportation infrastructure, which is what we see here. And then in areas where there's floodplain. And the place types that we can use to increase environmental justice, or the strategies that we can use to increase environmental justice, are your buffering from heavy industrial uses and transportation infrastructure, and then not mapping intense places in floodplain. So this again, we saw this before, but this is the draft policy map for this geography. And we'll look at growth allocations really quickly before getting into the interactive portion of the presentation. So growth allocations, the city is projected to grow by almost 150,000 housing units in 2040. You can see that for this geography, of those 150,000 housing units, just over 1,000 are projected to be included in this area. And that only makes up about 1% of the city's growth projection overall. And then with your jobs, we're expected to grow by about 200,000 jobs by 2040. And just a little over 3,000 jobs are expected to come into this geography. And that's about 2% of the jobs overall. So now we'd like to move into the community conversation piece and the type of feedback that we'd like to get. And this is a relatively small group, so we can probably just unmute and have a conversation about this. But the type of feedback that we're looking at is looking at the actual map for the geography and asking whether or not there are any additional steps that we can take with or approach so that the 2040 policy map is better aligned with the comprehensive plan, or are there any adjustments specifically to the map to be made to show more accurately? So we do have just one polling question, and we could probably just run the poll and then talk about it if we need to have a conversation. But we've heard from some stakeholders that a lot of the existing commercial development throughout Charlotte doesn't align with the comp plan vision for walkable and integrated communities. And the question that we'd like to ask is, how important is it that commercial place types in this community planning area evolve into neighborhood activity centers? So we can either launch the poll, or if we want to put the question in the chat.
Gretchen, I'm going to launch the poll, but we just have former Councilwoman Patsy Kinsey with us now. I think Mark had to drop off earlier, so I'll just go ahead and launch the poll. But
yeah, just to capture it, and then we can certainly have a conversation about it. Okay. So it looks like maybe there's a bit of a lag with the poll. So Patsy, if you wanted to just maybe unmute and if you had some input on this, that'd be great.
I am unmuted, but there's somebody outside across the street with a terribly loud.
You could barely hear it.
Something. Okay.
You could barely hear it. It's okay.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure I totally understand. Some of you know where I'm coming from. I'm very, very protective of the inner ring of our historic neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to do anything that's going to damage those neighborhoods. So I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, maybe let me rephrase the question.
I think some people wonder with these older neighborhoods, the inner ring, as I mentioned, it's you just don't go in and change it to fit the plan. And I think some people are trying to figure out, well, this is an older neighborhood. What are you going to do to make it look like the plan? I'm hoping what planning is talking about is that over time, maybe it will, evolve into something. And I'm sure that has to be what it is. Yeah.
So maybe let me rephrase the question first. And you're right that this is intended to be, this is a long range plan through 2040. So some of these changes we don't anticipate happening right away overnight. It will take some time. You're right about that. So let me rephrase what the question is asking. So the commercial place type is typically your older single-use commercial that's very car oriented. And the question here is that maybe that's not one of the goals of the comp plan is to make communities more walkable and more integrated. So that seems to be in contrast. The commercial place type seems to be in contrast with that, since they're typically more car oriented. So the question is, how important is it that over time that the commercial place types, which are typically more car oriented and single use and not very well integrated, for this area become neighborhood activity centers, which are usually your more walkable, integrated areas where people can walk to, say, dining and shopping and things like that. That's what the question is trying to get at.
When I look at the neighborhoods in this particular area, many of them are walkable. You look at my neighborhood, I can walk almost anywhere I want to go. Plus over into the Plaza Midwood area. I've walked over there before to the grocery store. So I'm not sure that that's really very important to some of the older neighborhoods that tend to have more. Yes, it might be it's not a really large development, but the services are there.
Okay. So it sounds like maybe we should then move to the actual map itself and maybe just talk about any concerns that you may have. And you should be able to see the draft of the 2040 policy map on your screen. So are there any specific areas that you'd like to cover or specific questions that you may have at this point?
I have a question about the little jagged thing at the bottom coming out from the city, the little other area. Is that the Greer Heights neighborhood?
This in here?
Yes. It looks like maybe it is. I was just wondering.
I think so.
Yeah. Are these maps included in that big shiny 4-color book that I have sitting in my office, or are these brand new? And if they are, where could I get hold of them?
Yeah, so we have an online application. We have the online application where you can leave a comment, and if you're okay with it, I'll navigate there so that you can see what it looks like.
And Ms. Kinsey, these maps are new. This is the first draft that was released on October 13th. So it's not included in the 2040 comprehensive plan, which I think is the book that you're referring to.
Yeah, that big old thick book.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
It should be, you should be able to see the map itself. Okay, you should be able to see the map itself for this geography.
Yes.
So this is basically the online version where you would be able to leave any comments.
I'm a little, I can barely see it, but where it says Medical Center Randolph, down near Billingsley, is that the county?
Yes, ma'am. That's the Billingsley kind of
Yeah,
office.
the county health department. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
So Patsy, did you have a specific area that you wanted to cover, or were your questions somewhat answered?
I'm just very concerned if single family areas or neighborhood 1 is reduced very much.
I believe that the reduction was 9%. We can go back and look at those maps. Let me
Where would it be? It might be. Well,
yeah. Hang on one second, and I will bring up the map again.
Ms. Kinsey, the any neighborhood 1 that was lost on the draft map would be a reflection of existing zoning entitlements. So perhaps a single family home that's zoned R20 or 22 for some reason. Or the loss may be reflective of adopted policies which recommended higher intensification through that community input process. I don't think we have like the specific parcels called out on this map of what is neighborhood 1, but recommended for something higher. But in general, like Gretchen said, there's a slight decrease of 9%.
Yeah, and Catherine, you're right. And it looks like, some of these larger central areas in the geography that are N1 remain N1. And it seems like the change may be towards where your arterials are. And if I have to guess, just from eyeballing this, you can see that it's up towards Independence, where we gain some neighborhood center.
Yeah, the Coliseum area.
Yep.
Hey, Gretchen, just FYI, we're viewing not your full screen, but like the slide viewer on your PowerPoint.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can you see that?
No, we're
you
still-
need to, switch your display settings.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, now we're good.
That's
Good.
that's-
Sorry about that. Thank you. Patsy, does that answer your question?
I think so. I might not like the answer to the question, but I think so. And please, all of you, please call me Patsy. That's just who I am, not Miss Kenzie.
Did you want to cover any other area on the map or any other questions?
I'd still like to have one of these maps in my hand. I'll work out something.
So Patsy, we also have hard copies at libraries and YMCA's, but it's of the whole city and they're not broken up by geography. I think we talked about putting the broken up geography ones on our website. But just because the city's so large, it's hard to break it down for everyone to look at the specific geographies.
Well, this is very helpful.
Was there something else that you wanted to cover?
Let me ask you one other question. The Community Activity Center up near Independence Boulevard and Central, between Independence and Central. Community Activity Center. That must be the development. That's the Cole property, isn't it?
Yes, I believe it is.
Okay, all right. I grew up right across the street from that property on Central Avenue.
So you've seen the changes, huh?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. This has been helpful. I appreciate it.
Good, absolutely. So if you don't have any other questions, we'll give you just the overview of what the next steps are. So these community conversations are going to continue through November 10th. We'll have everything recorded and on our website. And then as COVID allows, we'll have some in-person office hours. And we'll announce when those are and where. The comment application, the online comment application that we showed earlier, that's going to be open through November 14th. So you're more than welcome to leave comments on there. And that's probably the most efficient way to do it, but we can also accept comments to our CLT Future 2040 email. And then we'll use community feedback to identify citywide revisions to the 2040 policy mapping approach and make a second draft available of the map expected sometime early 2022. So you'll see another draft version of this early next year. And if no one has anything additional, or Patsy, you don't have any additional questions, we can probably end here.
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to end